I started to think, I was like, this is going to be done like that. I was like, these sets aren't going to be here in a minute. And this character is never going to get to speak in a few years anymore. Don't commit the sin of being so mired in anxiety that you don't allow the gratitude and aliveness to sort of flood you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Carganilla Online Variety Entertainment Podcast. Here's your host, Paul Carganilla.
Hello and welcome to COVE. This is the online variety show in which we aim to both entertain and inspire both our podcast listeners and YouTube viewers through a variety of entertainment offerings, art forms, music, poetry, storytelling, special guest interviews, travel blogs, dramatic readings of great works, original works from listeners and friends. But today is a very, very special guest interview as someone who's very near and dear to my heart and I also admire so much creatively is joining us today, and we'll talk about him and introduce him in just a second. But before we do, there could not be... We could never eat grandmother if Red Riding Hood didn't exist. So let's bring in and say hello to our producer Craig Jackman.
Welcome.
I don't know if that made sense, but it sounded intriguing in my head before it just came out of my mouth.
Which is why the howling wolf had to come out.
Absolutely.
You just brought it out. If I'm sure people knew what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Now, of course, stalking in the woods to find Red, we actually found what I think is quite a person to be part of our podcast today. And what a history he has. Refreshing to see someone who has been not just in front of the camera too, but behind the camera as well.
Sure. And with an improv background, we do so much improv, or we did at least during COVID, so much improv virtually here on this YouTube channel. But what I love about Zach is I was thinking about this on my walk this morning, having a conversation with this man is like connecting with an old friend who you've known before you were born, and also just celebrating and reflecting on all of the beautiful things in life at the same time. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I could talk to him for days on end and never get tired of it. I'm sure he'd get sick of us, but let us not waste any time. We'll get right to it. We'll tell you all about him. Zach Woods, our guest today, is an actor, comedian, writer, director, originally from Trenton, New Jersey. He grew up in Pennsylvania and got his college education at NYU. He started performing improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York when he was just 16 years old, and then went on to teach improv at Columbia University, Duke, and the Lincoln Center. Eventually, he came out to Los Angeles, where he booked a role in a little tiny show you may have heard of called The Office, in which he breathed hilarious life into the awkward character Gabe Lewis in the last 3 seasons 7, 8, and 9. He has since done a ton of movies, television, voiceover work. For the full list, pull up his IMDb, but most notably HBO Silicon Valley, where he starred in 6 seasons as Jared Dunn. Avenue 5 is Matt Spencer, and he was recently the murder victim in season 2 of Apple TV Plus's The After Party, which you'll remember Everly, my daughter, was in season 1, so that's a cool connection. But the biggest thing we want y'all to take away from today, as far as his projects go, is that Zach is currently the showrunner, director, writer, and actor on the upcoming series In the Know, which he co-created with Mike Judge, the Mike Judge. If you're my age, you remember Beavis and Butthead, Office Space, and the endless things that
Hank, what's his name from
Damn
Texas?
it, Bobby.
That's it.
King of the Hill, yeah.
King of the Hill, thank you. Yes,
his
King
writing
of the Hill.
partner, Brandon Gardner, as well, for Peacock. It's actually dropping on Thursday, the 25th of January here. And as I mentioned, he is a creator. He also has 2 amazing short films that he's created. Check them out on YouTube's David and Bud. Of course, the reason I know him is because of through Everly. My daughter was cast in his second short film there called Bud, and just getting to know him and watching him work specifically with a family member and a child, both in one fell swoop. It has been fascinating for me to see, and just as I mentioned, any conversation with him is just invaluable. Let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming to the Carganilla Online Variety Entertainment Podcast, Zach Woods.
Hello. We joked about it before it started, and then I still came in at the wrong moment.
I put it out into the universe, and just like The Secret.
That's right. You manifested my social awkwardness. But I feel so happy to be here and a little bit shy, and I'm so glad that you guys invited me. And I am crazy about you, and I'm crazy about your whole family. And Craig, I'm now newly crazy about you as well. So thank you for having me.
Oh, dude, we're so blessed that you're here. And we've been talking about this for so long because I launched my podcast like right when the strike started. And we've been saying we're gonna make it happen. And thank goodness the day is here. We can just sit down and chat. And normally I've got like a ton of notes. I've got like a roadmap of where I want the conversation to go. But with you, I just knew like I wanted it to happen organically. So I've got a couple of bullet points, but for the most part, I can't wait to just pick your brain about creativity and your process and your experiences and all your takeaways. But before we jump into that, we put all of our guests through the ringer at the beginning of the episode with the 60-second introduction icebreaker challenge, where other than anything that I read professionally or anything on your resume, what could you possibly tell the world about Zach Woods in 60 seconds or less? Are you up for the challenge?
Of course.
All right, here we go. And 3, 2.
And it's just anything non-professional. Okay. When I was a kid, I was terrified that my mother was a witch, even though she was a wonderful person. I had in my head that maybe she was a witch and wasn't telling me. I love New Jersey. New Jersey is my favorite state in the country, maybe my favorite place on earth. I'm a vegan, LA cliche, but I love old Jewish delicatessens and I like hanging out in them. I like the ambience of them. I like the idea of like the cozy ambience. Okay, what else? I think that dogs are basically people. I make very little distinction between the two of them. I consider my dog more or less a person. I have road rage. I feel like in my life, I try to be a kind person and try to treat people with respect. But the second I get behind the wheel, that all goes out the window and I become a true ghoul, a demon. And if I've ever been rude to you on the road, I apologize. You were probably in the right, and I was just frightened. I like sad things. I sometimes find very comforting. I feel comforted by sad movies, and sometimes happy stuff can also be comforting, but sometimes it can make me feel like it's like when you're in a bad mood on a sunny day. I can't play any sports, but I love watching boxing. I love watching boxing very much. And I also like this YouTube channel called Street Beefs, where it's like, it takes place in quote unquote Satan's backyard, which is just some guy's yard in Virginia. And then people fight each other. And I think it's fascinating. Maybe it's not a good thing to support because maybe it's like people get hurt. I don't know. Like I have mixed feelings about it, but I do find it fascinating. How am I doing on time?
You're great. I mean, that's 2 minutes.
It was 2 minutes? Paul, you should have stopped me. I feel bad. I'm just like
I don't stop people.
Soliloquizing.
The whole reason I do that is because I want to hear what's at the front of people's minds when you ask somebody, don't tell me about your work, tell me about you. Like, and you only have a very finite time to do it. Like, you get to hear like what's right there for people to share about. And it's a great launching point to, just find things to talk about as if we didn't have enough. But my mom's in the YouTube chat actually right now, and she says, love the witch story. That is fascinating, right? My mom's not a witch, though.
And then as far as I know, she would reassure me. I'd be like, Mom, are you a witch? And she would say no. I'd be like, oh, thank goodness. And then I'd be like, but that's what a witch would say. And so I'd be like, Mom, that's what a witch would say. Are you sure you're not a witch? She'd be like, no, I'm not a witch. And it's like, it was this kind of endlessly renewable source of anxiety. And it came from reading Roald Dahl's The Witches. And in the beginning of Roald Dahl's, have you ever read that book?
I think it's been years.
Oh boy, it's scary. Basically, the first line, one of the first lines is anyone can be a witch. They don't ride broomsticks. They don't wear tall, pointy hats. And he lists all these people. The postwoman could be a witch. That woman who offered you a sweet earlier this week could be a witch. Even your school teacher who's reading you this right now could be a witch. See how she smiles at the absurdity of the idea? That could be a cover. She could be a witch. So my parents read me that book, and I remember thinking like, oh no, like, oh no, anyone could be a witch. And I feel like I've had some version of that for the rest of my life. Like, obviously, I outgrew the witch thing, but that kind of feeling of like, is this person, can I trust this person or can I trust myself? Like, am I going to be disappointing? Is this person going to be disappointing? I think I have a little bit of that still in me. So thanks a lot, Roald Dahl. You ruined my life.
Do you? And my mom's saying in the chat, you say witch like it's a bad thing. Maybe I'm a good witch. And
That's right. That's a good point. I love witches now. I will say I do.
do you believe in like the afterlife and stuff? Like, do you think that there's a possibility that you were involved in Massachusetts at some point?
Like I was one of those dreadful judges who like sent adolescent girls to be like drowned or whatever.
And now
I certainly hope not.
your soul is still trying to atone for it, and you're like reading your parents reading that to you when you were a child was like the worst thing they could do.
It's interesting. I mean, don't rule it out. I'll never say decisively that I wasn't a Puritan judge in a past life, but I think I don't know that it was about witches specifically as much as feeling like there's this kind of unbridgeable gap between me and the people I love, that the anxiety of that. Like it was the first time as a little kid where I was like, oh, wow, there's no way around this. There's no way to conclusively know that I understand the sort of contents of my parents' hearts and minds and imaginations. There's just this unbridgeable distance, and you have to kind of go on faith. Like, and I think that was something that even when I was much older was a kind of core anxiety that like it might be hard to close the distance between me and people I love. And I think it's part of my attraction to stories and art and music, which is it feels like a way of reaching past language and past all of these kind of faltering tools we have to connect with each other, to go like straight, like soul to soul, basically. Like I feel like when you hear a song or you see a movie or you see a painting, it's like you can tunnel under all of the malarkey and get straight from like it's like a direct line from your heart to mine. And I think so for that reason I often feel kept company by stories even more than like just being around people. I mean, I love being around people too, obviously, but
There's so much of that in the short film that there is the whole reason we know each other is you cast my daughter in this brilliant film called Bud that you wrote with your writing partner, Brandon Gardner. And you wrote, produced, directed, and every time I watch it, and not just because she's my daughter, like I get so emotional because if anybody out there hasn't seen it, you're listening to the podcast, you're watching on YouTube. As soon as you're done with this episode, go to YouTube, it's called Bud. Just put in the search engine Bud Zach Woods, you'll find it. It is a beautiful film. It's like 11 minutes long, and if I'm correct, what do you?
I think that's right.
And the link is in the chat if you're watching the live stream, so watch it later. But the whole it's this beautiful story, beautifully told between a daughter and her father, and the father has done something, but you don't know what it is, and that doesn't matter. And it's fascinating to see in the YouTube comments, comment after comment after comment, what did he do? Tell us what, I don't get it. And that's not the point. And what you just said is just like exactly that. It cuts through the specifics of what and why, and just gets more to the feeling behind it.
I think I'm really like in that particular movie, we're really interested in these instances in which people are sort of publicly shamed. there's a tendency to focus on whether or not they deserve it. You know, if what they did was bad enough to justify the kind of public ridicule or ostracism, if that's even a word, that they receive. And Brandon and I were thinking like it would be interesting to see that experience from the perspective of someone who just doesn't have the information to be able to do that kind of moral algebra, who is just having an experience of seeing somebody they love sort of pilloried in this particular way. And I think Everly is such a beautiful person and soul, but she's also such a spectacular actor. And seeing the way she received the events of that little movie um, is the movie. I think it's her, you know, it's her heart is the kind of animating. That's the fairy magic that makes the story come alive. Because I feel like sometimes people feel, or maybe just I feel like if I have the information, then I really understand something. But I think there's a lot of ways of understanding things, and just having sort of literal facts isn't necessarily always the best way to understand something. There's a more kind of like intuitive or experiential way of feeling things that I think has its own benefits and limitations, I guess. I think I'm starting to veer into the direction of the pretentious, Paul. Rescue me.
No, and what what I love about you is that you know you're so curious. You ask a lot of questions, and a lot of people don't. And you wanting the information, you wanting to make decisions based on being informed, is something that feels like it's dying in this world. And that film that you made is such a commentary on that.
Can I ask you, because I'm curious, like for you, are there any movies that you saw when you were growing up or now or recently where you're like, I've never been able to explain this experience or this feeling, but I could show someone this movie and be like, this is what, do you know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever been able to use a song or a film or a piece of art as a way of explaining some part of yourself to somebody else? Not even something you made, just something that, because you've made like beautiful, lots of beautiful things yourself, but have you ever decoded some part of yourself to somebody else using a third party's piece of art?
I don't think I've ever felt so connected to something that it would explain something better than I could, maybe.
Mm.
Um, but I can totally understand that. Like it to me, it might be completely unrelated, but it reminds me of the first time I hear music. I for the rest of my life, anytime I hear that song, I remember the first time I remember where I was. I remember the smells I was smelling. I remember the textile. Like, I feel like that's kind of just like a relation to art in the way that you're saying, like, if you can't put it into words, put it into a feeling. I don't know why that I feel like it's related somehow.
Wait, so like you can always, like if you hear a song, it's like a little time machine. It sends you back to the first time. So they're sort of grafted onto each other. It's almost like a duck, like a baby duck who sees its mother, and then it's like, that's it, imprinted on you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not overwhelming, like it's all I see, but it's always there, and I can tap into it. You said something fascinating. Sorry, whenever I have guests on, I try to consume other things that other podcasts episodes they've been on. So I try not to talk about the same thing people can hear somewhere else, but I also, it's a blessing and a curse because I hear things that I want to bring up when I talk to you. But you said something that I think you said your friend said, and that is that like places aren't places, they're time.
Yeah, like often when, like for example, when I think of New York City, it's less that I'm thinking of the geography of New York City, and it's more that I'm thinking about the time that I lived in New York, and so often people go to places expecting to find the place, but really what they were missing was the time, and so you go there and you might feel slightly like I don't know, betrayed by the experience because you're like, oh wait, I didn't want New York. I wanted New York in 2003, or whatever.
I thought that was a brilliant way to explain it. And I've said many times throughout life, like I equate it to going to Disneyland. How many
Mm.
times have you gone to Disneyland? You still have a favorite time. Why? Because of who you were with, because of the time you were experiencing, what was going on in your life. So you can keep going back to the same place and you're going to experience it different every time because it's a different time and you're with different people.
I think it's really interesting. Like, this is okay. I mean, I feel like I've been talking about lots of sad stuff, but whatever. This is something that I thought was really fascinating. It's a little on the dark side, so, but someone told me this thing once that I thought was so moving, which is they said, like, if someone you love passes away, you don't just grieve the loss of them, but you grieve the loss of a version of yourself that is specific to them. In other words, the way you were reflected in their eyes is a version of yourself that is really specific and can't
Mm.
be replicated. And so it's, that's part of what you're grieving too, is the particular version of you that only they saw. And I thought that was so beautiful. And I think about it now sometimes. Certain people make you feel, yeah, it's almost like there was some theater director, there was some Eastern European theater director where he would get like lifetime best performances from all of these actors. I can't remember his name. But at some point, someone started interviewing the actors he directed, and they said, "What is it? Like, why do you get all these incredible performances out of all of these people?" Or no, 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 no. Sorry, they didn't ask him. They asked the actors. What was it about him that allowed you to access that performance? And the actors all said some version of the same thing, which is, I knew no matter what I did, he would respond with love and with fascination.
Mm.
And I thought that was so interesting. It's like, so in that case, for those actors with that guy, the version of themselves they felt like in his presence was lovable and fascinating, and that freed them up to be experimental and take risks and be more vulnerable and all that stuff. And I don't know. I think about that a lot. Like, what version of a person are you inviting them to be, and vice versa? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, and I think that's truly fascinating how, like, when your loved one dies, it's not only them that's going away, but it's how they perceived you and how they felt about you. I did one of my episodes drop every Tuesday. Tuesday this year fell on the 5-year anniversary of the Borderline mass shooting here in Thousand Oaks. And I, felt very connected to that. It's right here in my backyard, basically. And I did a special episode where I talked to survivors who were there that night. And they had a recurring theme that I thought reminded me of this and is devastating and dark, of course, too. But when something like that happens, you're there, you're present for a tragedy where people lose their lives, and it's a horrific moment. But you don't only mourn maybe your friends that were there or mourn the people who died in that incident, but you mourn who you were before that
Oh,
moment,
wow.
because you will never be that version of you again.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And you don't get a chance to say goodbye. It's not like you get to say goodbye to the version of, it's not like you get to do some kind of, right, it's just like that. You're transformed. That's really, really interesting. Do you know Esther Perel?
I don't.
She's this like therapist who does a lot of podcasts and things like that. And she said this thing that I thought was interesting, that's sort of similar in a weird way. She said most people over the course of their lives will have like 6 or 7 major love romantic relationships. And she said some people will have them with like 6 or 7 people, and some people will have them with one person,
Wow.
2 people, where like over the course of a marriage, as you change and your partner changes, you have sort of different marriages within your marriage, because what you need, what you're afraid of, what you yearn for changes so drastically that if you were to sort of parachute in to different decades, the actual way the relationship works, the rules, the norms, the whole thing would be different. And I've never been married, but I thought that was fascinating to think about. And I talked to my folks about it who have been married a long time, and they were basically like, yeah, that was our experience. And then I've talked to other people who have been married where they're like, nah, I feel like we sort of like It's been one marriage. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Interesting. Yeah, I was kind of laugh internally when I hear people who are 24 or 25 and they're like, "Oh, I'm 25, I'm not married yet." And I feel like that's such an old-fashioned way to think about it, but like how I mean, there's scientific all the science bit that will tell you when your brain is fully developed, but you as a person, you change throughout your life. Like your brain could be fully developed, but you're not going to be who you are year to year. We're constantly changing. Life is a journey.
Do you feel like this is kind of a weird question, but do you feel like as life has progressed for you, do you feel like life has gotten more intense or less intense or just the same?
Probably just different. I was I feel like I was under a lot more stress before or earlier in life. I think you know, a lot of a lot of it is school, being brought up and this and that, and finding the right partner, finding the right job, finding the right home, uh, creating a family, all these expectations that life puts on you. I think I'm at a point now that's really I've never been happier. But I also feel like if you asked me this question any other point in my life, I would say I've never been happier, except
That's
for
amazing.
a few maybe a 6 months or a year, a couple years back when I was at my lowest. But I feel like I you know I've always had this mentality. I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but when I was in college, I took a class called On Death and Dying. And the purpose of the course was to teach you that, that anyone who's living is going to die, and the grief process and how to deal with that, but also that you're going to die too. And it was the most valuable course I've ever taken. And I talk about it all the time because it just like, as a 20-year-old kid, just kind of drove home the fact that, yo, you're here once, and the natural end is death, and it's going to happen to you, and it's going to happen to everyone that you meet, and it's going to happen to everyone that you love. And just having that prepare me for the rest of my life, I feel like was a blessing, because I have just since that class lived my life as like, today, seize the day today, like, and enjoy every moment as much as you can. We all get caught up in the day to day, the chores, the work, and the things we got to get through. But I try to take time every day to think of all of the things that I'm grateful for, and
Mm.
my heart just swells and fills with the love for not only the people in my community and my family, but the life that I have and that I'm living. And I just feel so blessed.
That's so beautiful, Paul. I mean, I feel so lucky to know you and Jamie and Everly and Noah, because I feel that you guys sort of radiate that. I mean, you're it's interesting. It's like it's funny. There are people who have this kind of enforced positivity all the time where it's like kind of you get the feeling they can't acknowledge the dark parts of life because it makes them too uncomfortable. I never get that feeling from you guys. It's like you can handle sadness or complexity and all that stuff, but you just seem like such a joyful, loving tribe. And your relationship to art too, I find to be like very moving, that you play music together. I heard a song that Jamie wrote the other day that was so beautiful. And it just seems like you have I mean, maybe romanticizing your family, but I just feel like I just all your kids are so playful and imaginative and goofy and kind, and I don't know, it just seems like, at least from a distance, it really looks like a beautiful, it's not surprising to me, I guess, to hear that you feel like your cup runneth over, because from a distance it looks that way. It's like, wow, these people seem totally crazy about each other and really, I don't know, in the flow of life or something.
I think we're surrounded by magic, and I think we try and recognize that. And I think everybody is, to a point. And it's all about mindset and the decisions that we make and how we choose to approach things and how we choose to react to the life around us. speaking of magic and being surrounded by magic, I just want to talk about something that, of course, this is I wanted to talk to you about your creativity, your creative process, and what part of your heart you bring to your projects and why that is so important to you. But I was, researching your story, and it's funny. I was telling producer Craig, like, I didn't know like anything about you when we met. I didn't know like really about your. I'm sorry. I watched the first two seasons of The Office, and then I stopped, and I never watched
I'm not
Silicon
offended.
Valley. And no, but so it's been like a journey within an eye-opening journey to just to look back at your catalog and hear about your story. And something that really struck me with I think it was the podcast you did, the Office Ladies, was the story about how you come out to LA. You're a huge fan of The Office. You meet the casting director and she puts you in the show, and it's your first major television role. And this is something, it was so interesting. We just had a conversation with, did you know that I'm interested in the Titanic? I like the Titanic. Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So
very well.
I
Yeah,
know.
I think that's
I was-
cool. That's one of the many things I love about you. Yeah.
so about an hour ago, we were recording an episode with iconic Titanic historian Don Lynch. He literally wrote the books on the history of the Titanic, and he's been down to the wreck site twice. And he was
Whoa.
James Cameron's historian on set. And so there's these magical moments in life where people who have a dream or have a passion or are following their heart um, just are blessed with these magical moments. Like him, his passion was the Titanic. He became the world renowned historian for everything Titanic, and then he finds himself on the set that James Cameron built that is Titanic to every last detail. And he's walking around the ships, going multi-level sets and huge sound stages where he says, you could walk the halls and you'd never know you're on a movie set. And to have that experience, but then to also go down, he went down to view the wreck site sitting next to James Cameron in a submersible. And just these moments in life that occur because you're following your heart and you're doing what you're driven to do. Sometimes these magical doors open, and so you land in Los Angeles, and you land a role on your favorite show that you've been watching for years. Can you just talk about like, I know it was a very stressful time for you, and you dealt with a lot of, hearing you talk about it, I was reminded a lot of like when I was thrown into the position that I currently have at my current job, like so much imposter syndrome, and any day they're going to realize I'm not fit for this job and just show me the door. But were you able to enjoy it by the end and kind of recognize how special that was?
I was getting there by the end of The Office, but it was hard because I think something I believed back then, which I still believe, is that Hollywood is certainly not a meritocracy. Meaning, like, obviously the person who gets the role, it's not necessarily that they're the most talented person. A lot of random, currents have to converge to make anything happen.
Luck.
And also the experience of getting paid to do what you love is such a ludicrous blessing, and often with this television paid well, that no one really deserves it. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think I felt like I know there's better actors out there than me, and I know there's people with more experience, and I'm getting this insane kind of pot of gold dumped in my lap. And can I justify that? As I've gotten older, I still basically believe that. I still believe it's not a meritocracy, and I still believe, I'm sure there are more talented actors out there than me that could have acted in all the different parts that I've played. But what I will say is that I'm okay with that now. I think I've made my peace where it's like, I work really hard. I really love the people I play. I try to show up with my whole heart and throw myself into it. And I do the best I can, and I'm grateful. And so if I happen to have won the lottery, I'll collect on it. I think I'm willing. I don't need it to be sort of justified anymore. I'll be like, if it's me, it's me. I'm not gonna spit in God's face. You know what I mean? Like I'll take it. I don't necessarily always understand it, but I'll take it and enjoy it and try to, give myself over to it when opportunity comes my way. But I think it's also very important to remember that like when things are good and when things are bad, that is not really a reliable thermometer for how good or bad the work you're doing is, or your talent. I don't think success is a metric to be trusted, but I think the kind of internal experience, it's exactly what you were talking about. If you feel like you're following your heart and you feel like you're moving in a direction, you're moving in a direction that feels creatively sincere, then that is a more sort of reliable guide to creative decision making and self esteem and all that stuff. But back then, I don't think I knew that. By the end, I was getting a little more relaxed and a little better able to enjoy it, but I was still pretty panicky. It really wasn't until season 3 or 4 of Silicon Valley where I started to enjoy things. And like I shot the pilot of Silicon Valley, right? And I called my mom on the way home sobbing. I was like, I'm just not good. I just blew it. I was terrible. Mike Judge thinks I'm a hack, blah, 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 blah. And then years later, then I did the first season. And I remember looking around and thinking, God, these guys are geniuses. They're so funny. I can't keep up. And then by season 3 or 4, I'd calmed down and I just thought, well, if these people haven't fired me, they obviously like having me around well enough, and I can sort of relax and enjoy it. And at that point, it's what you were saying about the death and dying class. I started to think, I was like, this is going to be done like that. I was like, these sets aren't going to be here in a minute. And this character is never going to get to speak in a few years anymore. And so drink it in. I remember going around and consciously thinking, this will not be here. We will not be here. So don't commit the sin of being so mired in anxiety that you don't allow the gratitude and aliveness to sort of flood you. And that was a real turning point. And I noticed that my work got better when I did that. I think I thought if I'm not freaking out, I'm not working hard enough. And if I'm not working hard enough, it won't be good. But when I allowed joy to be the fuel as opposed to anxiety, and gratitude to be the fuel, then I felt like my work just got better and deeper and freer and more playful. So,
Yes, absolutely. And it's so wild to think that like someone as talented as you and as renowned as you, as a comedic genius, still has these imposter syndrome feelings that really are crippling almost.
oh, it was really, yeah. I remember I sought out my therapist, who is still my therapist, and I talked to her. I was like, I need to figure out a way to do work that isn't ego driven, because my feelings, my ego is basically, when I say ego, I don't mean like cocky or arrogant, but just that where it's not about me, where I'm a small part of a big thing and I don't have to think about myself so much. I can just sort of surrender to a something I believe in. And I think that over time I've been able to do that more and more, and it's such a better way to live. But you see it, you must see it all the time. There's people who have all kinds of success who are maybe not all that talented, or people who are phenomenally talented, but they don't have a talent for self-promotion. And so they, I mean, it's a tale as old as time.
Is that becoming comfortable with it and being able to embrace was that kind of behind your shift to creating your own stuff, or how did?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was in a panic for so long that once the panic died down, I had all this sort of mental real estate that used to be taken up with fear. And I was like, okay, well, now that I'm not spending all this time just freaking out, what do I actually care about? What do I actually want to do? What do I really want to put my money on? And it was these stories and these characters that I wanted to create and make come alive. I mean, I'll tell you like a really weird story that I've never told anyone before, and I feel a little trepidatious about telling, but like, whatever, we're friends, and I can.
It's just going out to the world.
Well, I want to be careful about how I tell this story because it's a strange story. But basically, right after I got on The Office, I they were nominated for an award, like an Emmy or a SAG award or something, and they had these swag suites, and they sent out invites to everyone in the cast to a swag suite. I don't know if you're familiar with these. I don't know if they still have them.
For the ceremony or
No, it was like before the ceremony, like a day before the ceremony or 2 days. You would, I was invited to go to the W Hotel in Hollywood, which no longer exists.
Hmm.
And they would take you up to the top floor of the hotel. And there were all these small women in high heels and black dresses. And one of them would meet you, and they would have a giant, it almost looked like a body bag. It was this giant black sack,
Okay.
and you would go around this room, which is full of actors doing this. And you would go from table to table and you would take a picture with whatever it is that they were giving away. And
Okay.
then it would go in the giant sack. So this little woman on her heels is dragging this sack around as it gets heavier and heavier in some sort of like bizarre, like nightmare version of Santa Claus, where it's like the sack's getting heavier and heavier, and it's this little woman in her heels. And I remember I kept trying to take it from her because I was like, please don't. And she's like, no, 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 we'll get in trouble. So it's like you have to just let her drag this sack of garbage, fancy garbage around. And then I went to this one table that my pillow guy was there. He was taking pictures with everyone. It was so weird. Anyway, I got to this one table and they were giving away trips. And they were giving away a trip to Fiji where they would give you the hotel room and the airfare for free. And I didn't have much money at this point because I just started doing the show. And so they gave it to me. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, I was like, if we ever get married, we will never be able to afford a honeymoon like this. So let's like go enjoy it and see what, this is crazy. I feel like it was some paperwork error or something, but I'll take it. So then I had to get my passport renewed, right? And so I went to the passport office, and there was a long line. It was the middle of the day, and I was at the back of the line, and there was a pregnant woman in front of me. There were old people in front of me, and someone from the passport office went like this from like, the line goes all the way to the door. The woman from the passport office goes, and I was like, she goes, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. This is weird. So I walked to the front of the line, and she goes, I watched The Office. She goes, come with me. And I was like, well, I don't have to. I was like, I'm happy to, like, I'd rather wait. She goes, come with me. And she grabs me and she pulls me into the passport office, and we go up to the whatever floor the passport office was on. And she goes, wait in here. And she put me in a room with a view of the Empire State Building. So I'm sitting there looking at the Empire State Building in this room by myself. And she came back and she handed me my passport, meaning like it's the kind of thing where you're supposed to fill out the paperwork and to get a stamp and then they send it to you. She just handed it to me. And when I went down the elevator and I started to leave, I swear to God, it sounds like made up, but it's not. I was passing this woman and her two little kids, and she was going to the security guard. She goes, they're little kids. They have to go to the bathroom. I have to step out of line, but I've been waiting a long time. And I hear this guy say to her, ma'am, rules are rules. And it was such a weird moment because on the one hand, I'm getting all this crazy, like Richie Rich treatment. I'm getting a trip to Fiji. I don't have to wait in the passport line. It's all this stuff is being. On the other hand, I feel like I'm doing like not that great a job on the show. I've been on a television show for 2 seconds, and it's not like some restaurant that's trying to get celebrities to eat there. And I'm not a celebrity, but it's the US government. These people pay taxes. It's an insane, insane thing. And I remember calling my father and just being like, I'm all mixed up because on the one hand, I really hit the lottery. Like I'm getting these things that it's unimaginable. Like who gets a free trip to Fiji? I mean, it's insane. And I'm getting this like weird VIP treatment. On the other hand, it's revealing to me how random and like chaotic it is and wrong. It's like there's this just a pregnant one. She's got little kids. Like, who gives a shit if I'm like, you know what I mean? Like it. So anyway, I'm going on and on about it, but that was one of those moments where I think that combined with my own imposter syndrome, like seeing the curtain peel back and being like, oh my God, this is how things happen. It's this unfair. It's this insane, but also being on the kind of winning side of that, at least for that moment, was a very weird experience. So sorry, I talked for like a half hour, but that was weird. And I don't mean to complain, because that's the other thing. It's insane. Like, you're complaining about your like fast passport experience and your free trip to Fiji, like, you monster. I don't mean, like, I'm not complaining. I'm just explaining that it was very confusing. I didn't know what to make of it, you know?
Well, you're a considerate person with a huge heart, and so I think, and you're so introspective. That's what I was saying. Like, but at the top of the show is just like the way you examine life and you're curious about life is so fascinating to me, and that's why I love to talk to you. I could talk to you so much more, but I'm sure you're very busy. We're coming up on the hour here, and I do want to talk about In the Know. It comes out like this week, and from all this self-doubting, mixed up stuff, like suddenly you're creating movies, shorts, and a TV show for Peacock, co-creating with Mike Judge, the comedic legend himself. And tell us about the show if you could.
Sure. That's a show about the third most popular NPR host named Lauren Caspian and the people who work at his station with him. And it's a combination, it's stop motion. So the people who did Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, these like world-class stop motion animators, animated the show with little puppets. And most of the show takes place in the offices of this NPR studio, but there are also interviews with real guests that Lauren, the stop motion puppet host, does. So, and those people are in video, they're not puppets. So we interviewed like Mike Tyson and Ken Burns and Tegan and Sarah and Hugh Laurie and all these amazing people. And he interviews them, and he's a very bad interviewer. And it was just such a treat to get to make it. I mean, it was so incredibly fun. And these puppeteers, I think something I think about a lot is that there's a tendency to reduce people to one thing, you know, that algorithmically it happens on social media. People do it to each other. People do it politically, where it's like, oh, you're just this one thing. But I think one of the beautiful things about fiction and art is it reminds you that people have all these contradictory parts. And one of the incredible things about stop motion is you have the actor who voices them, but then there's like 30 different animators who all get their crack at animating the character. So built into each one of these little characters is like 30 different people who have made them come alive. And so there's no getting around that they have multidimensionality, because it's done by all these different folks. And I thought they did such a beautiful job with it. I mean, the truth is, like, I sometimes think I sound more neurotic or more tortured in interviews than I mean to, because I do think that that kind of existential confusion is a big part of life and work and all that stuff. But also, the joy of it is overwhelming. The joy of getting to work with people who have live hearts and live eyes, who, you know, who are excited to play pretend with you, to get to see people will bring such beautiful materials from their past and from their imaginations. It's like you get to see the most wonderful parts of people, and you get to be parts of these like little families that form and then disband and then reform in a different configuration. I mean, I truly feel so happy and lucky that I get to partake in that part of it. And that's the part you can trust. It's what you're saying before about your heart. It's like all the bizarre money part and the promotional part and the influence trading and all of that can be so noisy that it can drown out that little whisper underneath, which is like is the whisper you most need to hear, which is like your creative instinct, your human instinct. And I've been so lucky to encounter so many people who have such a beautiful, where that little voice is so beautiful. And I consider you one of those people, and I consider everyone in your family one of those people.
I call it the heart's fire.
Yeah, the heart's fire.
Heart's fire. Before we let you go, real quick, I had a question I needed to ask you, and it
Please,
comes
man.
it comes with a story first.
Right.
So I have another podcast that I co-host. It's called the Magical Mystery Hour. We talk about mysteries, aliens, true crime, conspiracies. We cover it all. And my co-host, her name's Amanda Benjamin. She's a huge fan of The Office, huge fan of your work, and her husband David, who also has a program here on the network, but he saw you one day on the ferry to Catalina, I'm told. And she was texting him, take a picture of him, take a picture of him. And he was like, no, that's creepy. So my question is, do you find times in life where you just notice people taking pictures of you, and is it creepy?
That's such a funny question. No one has ever asked me that. I'll be honest. Here's what I think. Someone asking for a picture, never creepy. Someone taking a picture surreptitiously, creepy.
Do you notice it though? Do you notice people doing
Once
it?
in a while. And I remember on that the last time I went to Catalina Island, my partner, my girlfriend at that time, and I had a serious argument on the way to Catalina. We ended up having like the best time, but I think we were both just like stressed out and we'd been late for the ferry and we were arguing. So if he'd taken a photo at that moment of like us like having an argument, it would have, and I'd seen it, I would have been like, buddy, like we're like working it out right now. Like, please don't. I like legit remember that because it was like such a stressful journey to such a magical weekend or whatever it was. So thank you for not taking the picture. But if he had come up and been like, would you mind if I take a picture for my wife? I would have been like, totally, I'm happy to do it because it's so flattering when people like stuff you're in or their family members like stuff you're in. So that's my feeling about it.
Okay. Well, he did not take the picture and he got in trouble for it. So, um,
Thank you. You're my hero, my knight in shining armor. Thank you for protecting me while I
any
fight.
last thing you want to mention before we release you and say you're free to the world?
No, I just am crazy about you, and I really am so happy to get a chance to talk to you. And I apologize for my long-windedness, but it was a treat. And you ask really beautiful questions and thought-provoking questions, unsurprisingly. And yeah, I'm just happy that you had me. Thank you.
Thrilled anytime I get to. Somebody in the live chat just asked if your beef with Drake is over yet.
Oh no, it's gotten much worse. It's really becoming, I would say, dangerous, and only dangerous for him because I'm very tough and he's very small compared to me. So Drake, you've been warned, and pull up, pull up. Let's go.
You hear that, Rom? Tell him. Tell him. All
Talk
right.
to Drake for me, please.
I I cannot wait. I treasure every moment we get to have a conversation, and I cannot wait to hopefully someday work in
I would
your
love
presence
that. I
again.
would
Work,
love that.
collaborate on something, and I love you, sir.
You too. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Craig.
Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. Just taking in every single thing, every single word that he says. I mean, I've got notes here. It's like being in the flow of life, following your heart, moving in a direction that is creatively sincere. I mean, these are things that just everybody needs to hear, to learn, to do. If it's me, it's me. Take me for who I am, what I am, allowing joy and gratitude to be the fuel. Oh my gosh. What great words. And because of that, his work became better. And actually, anybody's work would become better, I think. Whether you're a performer or just working in an office, the joy and the gratitude, let it be your fuel and let it go and let it happen.
Call it a heart's fire, call it a creative whisper, but if it's always there and it's always tugging you and it's always nagging at you, you got to pay attention to it, or what are we doing here in life?
Exactly. And I know that, with Everly, with Zach, with you and I and other people who are in the performing business, actors, acting, it is lighting that heart's fire, that creative whisper, letting it out. And I found a poem from pickmeuppoetry.org that talks about acting and just the different phases of it and how imagination is so important and part of it, and just working it, letting it go. And this is a poem from George Barlow. He's an American poet, and it is just called Acting.
Excited to hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Jackman interpreting a poem by George Barlow, Acting.
Imagination makes the actor's art, the eager brain, the emotional, swift heart that realizes all, the power to live and move and have one's being in that same sphere with the audience now is seeing, whether it be a bright room or a haunted hall. Imagination is everything. Depends the power to feel through kiss on kiss, the living passion leap, the power to magnetize oneself the first, to feel, to be most blessed or accursed, the power of rapturous joy, the power to weep, the power to feel within some quiet room, ghost after ghost, if need be, fill the gloom with shadowy shapes and sound, the power to love, as if a life depended on winning sweet lips ere the evening ended. This gift we seek, how seldom is it found? Then how the power speeds forth and holds each heart, recipient and responsive to its art, art being life indeed. How the spectators hush their souls to hear, yea, listen with the spirit's intense ear, when a real genius spirit takes the lead.
Turns out I have to make a correction to, I guess I misunderstood or I misheard, but Amanda didn't want David to take a picture of Zach surreptitiously. She was trying to get him to take a selfie. So my bad, I misunderstood, and I apologize for misrepresenting your side of that story, Amanda. I didn't mean it, but you're right. It was funnier during the conversation that I did misunderstand. Anywho, if this is the first you've heard of the Magical Mystery Hour podcast that I co-host with Amanda Benjamin, and you're interested in mysteries, I invite you, go find that, subscribe, and binge it. We just finished season 1, and we talk about all kinds of mysteries: Bigfoot, aliens, conspiracies, true crime, as I mentioned. Who doesn't love a good mystery? And if you're that person who does love a good mystery, find us over there. Just search for Magical Mystery Hour wherever you enjoy your podcasts, or on the Vaudacity Network on YouTube.
I put the coat on her!